knowing your rights during childbirth. I am embarrassed to say that I had no idea what my rights were during childbirth. I honestly kind of thought that I was legally obligated to just do whatever my OB/GYN told me to do. Not fully, like I still had birth preferences and kind of advocated for myself, but I think at my core, like I didn't really understand that ultimately all of the choices were mine. And that's the gist of this whole video, that ultimately every single decision during childbirth, you and you alone have the final say in it. Nobody else gets to make a decision for you. It is your right to make every single decision during childbirth. And unfortunately, some, definitely not all, but some medical care providers will try to sway your decisions based on legal or timing considerations, and a lot of times maybe their opinions are somewhat based on the hospital's possibly outdated culture, their personal biases. But there are ways to get around this. There are ways to make sure that you can advocate for your birthing rights during childbirth and have a really empowered experience. So one of the first ways to do that is to know your rights. So let's get into it. Okay, so one of the first and most important birth rights is receiving thorough information about any intervention being recommended. So if the doctor comes in and says, okay, so this is going on and we need to do this, you get to say, oh, okay, well, hold on. I have questions. And you have a right to continue to ask questions until you feel satisfied with the responses. Like, why do you feel this is medically necessary? Is this an emergency? What are my other options? And the care provider is obligated to provide in easily understandable terms the risks and benefits of anything that they're recommending. You can also ask if the information they're providing is evidence-based or if it's just based on their own personal experiences. Ideally, it's evidence-based. And you can also ask the cost of everything down to like the stool sampler or there's the stool softener they're trying to give you in that like little white cup. You get to ask any question that you want to ask, and you don't have to make any decision until you are satisfied with the answers. You can also request options. So if you're unsatisfied with a proposed course of action, you get to ask for alternatives. And then ultimately, you have the right to turn down interventions. So if you receive all of the information about what they're recommending, and at your core, you're just like, this just doesn't feel necessary, and it doesn't feel right to me, then you get to say, no, I'm turning that down. And you know, while you might not be a medical expert, you are an expert on your body and your intuition. And if everything in you is screaming, no, don't say yes, you get to listen. And something else that's important to remember is just because you signed a consent for care form, probably when you were admitted to the hospital, it does not mean that your care providers do not have to obtain your permission before doing anything to you, anything at all. And the following procedures, these are things that some women are actually surprised that they don't have to say yes to. So vaginal exams is one of them. If you feel really uncomfortable with vaginal exams, you get to say, no, actually, I don't want a vaginal exam, and nobody can force you. A HEP lock, which is essentially like the start of an IV. Almost all hospitals, it's their protocol to just start it when you are admitted in the hospital. You are not legally obligated to get it. A lot of times they want to put one in so they have an open vein should they need to hook you up to an IV in an emergency. But if you feel like it's unneeded, you have every right to say, no, I'm not getting a HEP lock. You also have the right to ask for a second opinion and or change care providers. So if you feel that your care provider isn't offering all of the information, or that you just can't trust them, or they make you feel uncomfortable, you can say, I would like to see another doctor, please. And you'll probably get pushback, but they are obligated to allow you to get a second opinion and potentially switch care providers. I had a client who changed care providers in the middle of active labor. She had a doctor that was just, for lack of a better term, kind of bullying her. And she said, you're fired. And she had a on-call midwife come and attend her birth, and the doctor was so mad. But she ended up having a beautiful birth experience because this midwife was amazing. So you have every right to change care providers. You also have the right to move around. So if you want monitors, tubes, IVs, whatnot removed so you can move around, you have every right to ask them to remove those. And again, you might get pushback. They might say, well, we probably recommend staying connected to the monitors because of X, Y, and Z. And their reasoning might make sense. And you might think, okay, actually, you're right. But if it doesn't, you can say, no, actually, I would like you to remove those so I can move around. That also goes for, when the baby's coming out. If they're like, well, we usually have women put their feet in the metal stirrups and lie on their back. If that doesn't feel good to you, you can say, no, actually, I'm going to squat, or I want to lay on my side. You get to be in whatever position feels best for you. You also have the absolute right to privacy. So nobody but you gets to decide who is in your birthing space. Even if the person in question works in the hospital, they don't get to stay in your room if you ask them to leave. And again, sometimes you get pushback for this, but ultimately, if they're like even a nurse, if you're assigned a nurse that just makes you feel uncomfortable, ask for a different nurse, or ask for that woman to not come into your room anymore, or that man. It's ultimately up to you. You also have every right to know who is in your birthing space. So you get to know the identity and qualifications of everybody that walks into your birthing space if that feels important to you. And this is a big one, and it feels like a scary one, but it's so important to know this is your right to check out of the hospital. So if you feel like the hospital is not supporting you, you don't feel safe there, you don't feel like you can trust anybody, you have the right to check yourself out. And I've worked with women that have done this against medical advice, and you have to usually sign a form saying, I am checking myself out against medical advice. But if you don't feel like you're being treated well, you can check out of that hospital and go check into a new one. You are not doing anything illegal by doing that. You also have every right to receive all of your records. You should be able to get all of your medical records at any time if you request them, and you also have the right to comprehensive explanations of everything in those records. Okay, if you feel like your rights are being violated in a hospital, you have the right to speak to a supervisor about that. And finally, you have the right to be treated like the intelligent, empowered woman that you are. Nobody has the right to talk down to you. Nobody has the right to make you feel like you're ill-equipped to make good decisions for yourself and your baby. If somebody treats you without respect, you have every right to turn around and demand it. Okay, so a few ways to make this easier on yourself, to make it easier to advocate for your birth rights. I'm going to get into that. Oh, something I want to mention is in the description of this video below, I have a link to a super comprehensive list of birth rights provided by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So check that out if you want a super duper in-depth list of your birthing rights. Okay, so in addition to understanding your birthing rights, again, there's a lot you can do to set yourself up for an empowered, beautiful birth experience. First and foremost, you want to find a care provider that believes in patient autonomy. So patient autonomy refers to a person's right to make a decision without a care provider putting undue influence on them. So ideally, you have a care provider that will clearly share with you the state of your health, your baby's health, and if intervention is needed, they should be able to pretty objectively provide the different options and answer all of your questions and urge you then to make your own decision. To say, here's all the information, but ultimately it's up to you. I'm going to support you in whatever you feel is best after receiving all the information. And practicing patient autonomy and having a care provider that urges you to do so, it does wonders for your self-governance. And it helps you have a more satisfying birth experience and to ultimately feel empowered. Okay, something else is to make a really thoughtful list of birth preferences. So we call them preferences because, of course, sometimes things change during birth and sometimes all of those preferences can't be followed. But bringing with you into your birth experience a list of how you would like to be treated, as long as, an emergency doesn't pop up, that does wonders for helping you be treated with respect and for people to honor your rights. So I really recommend creating those birth preferences. I have a few videos on this channel about how to create really solid birth preferences. Also, consider hiring a doula. So while a doula can't be your voice during birth, they can be like the birthing angel on your shoulder, helping you to help yourself, to advocate for your rights, and to remind you what your rights are if you forget them during birth. Okay, the next tip I have is to take 2 childbirth prep courses. So the first class that I recommend taking is a class at the hospital where you will be delivering your baby if you're having a hospital birth. And this allows you to kind of do some recon and to understand what the protocol is at that hospital, kind of what their birth culture is, and that'll help you determine what you might be up against or what rights they might push against. And then after that, I recommend taking a childbirth prep course that really is aligned with your personal birthing philosophy, like a hypnobirthing class, birthing from within, Lamaze. And then what you can do during that class is you can take the information that you got from that hospital birth class and say like, hey, these are some of the things that they told me that they usually do. Like, should I be concerned about any of this? Like, how can I tell them no? And more than likely, your childbirth prep educator is going to help you navigate that and then create those birth preferences that will really support you in that specific hospital environment. Something else that's important is to be really, really clear when refusing treatment. So if the care provider says, I recommend X, Y, and Z, I think we really should do that, right? Okay, great, we're going to do it. And you're like, no, 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 no. You need to clearly say, I am refusing that intervention. I am saying no, to make it really super clear. Something that happened to me during my birth is the care provider said, okay, I think we need to break your water now. And I was kind of out of it. And I was like in throes of active labor. And I think I said something along the lines of, well, wait, I'm not quite sure. I think I have some questions. And then I started to have a surge and that distracted me. And while I was having a surge, they broke my water. So I should have said, no, don't do anything to me until I make a decision. I should have been clear and definitive, but I wasn't. So be really clear when refusing treatment. Or if you're not sure, say, I am not sure about this. Do not touch my body until I make a clear decision. The next thing is to research the laws in your area. So each state has slightly differing laws when it comes to childbirth. So it's wise to reach out to the ACOG Resource Center. You can email them at resources@acog.org. Again, that's resources@acog.org, and just reach out and ask for guidance about up-to-date regulations for your specific state. And the last thing is to fortify your courage. I understand that it can feel really uncomfortable to advocate for your birthing rights, especially when you're dealing with an authority figure. And, let's be honest, a lot of times we see doctors as authority figures. So it takes, a lot of courage and a lot of empowerment to stand up for your rights. So I have a link to a meditation in the description of this video that will help you to fortify that courage. All right, if you have any questions about your rights during birth, let me know in the comments below.